Russia experienced the deadliest terrorist attack in 2 decades when 4 gunmen entered a Moscow concert hall on March 22, 2024. The gunmen opened fire around 8 p.m., and in 20 minutes at least 134 people were killed, over 150 people were wounded, and the venue was on fire. The Russian authorities reported arresting all 4 gunmen directly involved and 7 others suspected of providing support for the attack. The narrative of who is responsible has started, and as expected, the identity and motive is clouded by the fog of the Ukraine-Russia war as accusations are battling for world opinion. Hours after the attack, ISIS-K took credit for the attack. The US stated they warned Russia of a potential terrorist attack, and the US Embassy in Moscow warned citizens to avoid gathering places in early March. The Russians dismissed the warnings as provocative and an attempt to sow discord in Russia. After the attack, the Russian government stated that the warnings lacked specificity to be acted upon. This ignoring of US warnings by Russia is a result of mistrust between the two countries and is another cost of the Ukraine-Russian war. The Ukraine war led to the Russian public and government to immediately suspect Ukraine. The idea is plausible, as some Ukrainian leaders have called on carrying into Russia to make the population experience the war. The Russians claimed they made arrests of the terrorist as they were heading to the Ukrainian border. This would make sense, for any terrorist group attempting to flee Russia could go to Ukraine because Russian authorities could not pursue into Ukraine. But trying to flee to Ukraine does not imply Ukraine involvement. One factor that backs the Ukraine denials of involvement is that terrorist attacks would hurt the Ukrainian cause. Ukraine is dependent on Western aid to resist the Russian invasion and support its economy. The West, having been targets of terrorist attacks themselves, are not likely to support an attack on Russian citizens, even when most of the public supports Ukraine. A Ukraine government-supported terrorist attack would certainly turn large parts of the West's citizens against Ukraine and would make it impossible for the West to continue to support the Ukraine war at anywhere close to the levels of today, or they would demand that Ukraine President Zelensky and his government step down. Ukraine involvement would also put the civilian population of Kyiv in even greater danger from a vengeful Russian military, which would also destabilize the Ukraine government's hold on power. France has been calling for European NATO countries to consider sending ground troops and more direct intervention in Ukraine to counter Russia. This French proposal is a red line for most NATO countries, but is starting to get some support within Europe. This would be a monumental boost to the Ukraine, and a Ukrainian terrorist attack on Moscow would end all traction of the French effort. The leading plausible theory is that ISIS-K conducted the attack, not because any other group would not have a reason to attack Moscow in a time of war, but because the lack of incentive for Ukraine to do so. Ukraine does have a desire for revenge, but this desire is outweighed by the risk of losing Western support if they attacked. Loss of Western support would mean an outright defeat of Ukraine to Russia. Other details will emerge from the attack and will provide a clearer picture in coming weeks.